So a couple weeks ago, I was blessed with the amazing opportunity to be able to head up to Chicago to see a little play, mildly successful. You may have heard of it. I got to see Hamilton! It was one of the coolest experiences of my entire life. I've seen a lot of musicals, and this one was by far the best and totally lived up to the hype. I am a long-time, well, as long as I can be, long-time Hamilton fan, so getting to see the show was like a dream come true, and the Chicago cast totally lived up to all of my expectations, totally just as good as the Broadway cast. It blew me away. Blow us all away. The cast was like incredible, and they all had such a different take on it from the Broadway version, but like still just as good. I'm probably going to use the word incredible a lot in this video because it was incredible. Miguel as Alexander was mind-blowing. He was so good. He sounded a lot more theater-y than Lin, and like I would describe his voice as if there was a scale of like Lin-Manuel Miranda to Aaron Tveit, Miguel Cervantes would be somewhere in the middle, right there on the middle line. He sounded a whole lot more like Broadway and theater-y, which I really liked. The whole cast actually sounded a bit more theater-y than the original cast did, which I really enjoyed because I'm a big Broadway fan. He is really short, so like during Farmer Refuted, like Hamilton would get up on the podium and get all up in Seabury's face, and Aaron Burr actually like took him and dragged him back down onto the ground, and it was the funniest thing ever. He seemed a lot younger than what I imagined Lin's Hamilton would be, and I don't think he is that much younger than Lin, but it was a lot more like teenager-y Hamilton. Very convincing as like the younger Hamilton during my shot. He was hilarious, like so funny. I didn't think of Hamilton being a super funny role until I saw Miguel in it. Like, he was just constantly making me laugh with all of his mannerisms and weird stuff. Like, when he goes, you know, when it's like, I was chosen for the Constitutional Convention, like, and Lin says it, like, really, like, smaller and, like, more excited. Well, Miguel starts, like, backstage and runs up and he goes, I was chosen for the Constitutional Convention! And like so excitedly and like not holding in the excitement at all, and it was the funniest thing. I was honestly a bit overwhelmed by the whole experience, so it's kind of hard for me to remember like specific instances of things happening, but he was incredible, totally lived up to my expectations, went way above. He was a better singer than Lin. But, like, that's kind of to be expected. I love Lin, don't get me wrong. But Miguel was a better singer. Ariana Afsar as Eliza. It was like Beyonce was put into Hamilton. That's what she sounded like. She totally reminded me of Beyonce, especially during Helpless. Like, and then, like, she did the riff in Helpless at the end, and it was, like, so good. Like Vilma Jindberg and Wicked good. Like that good of a riff. She was a lot more youthful. So like during Helpless, the whole like giddy teenage girl falling in love, like it really felt like that. And Helpless, I loved her Helpless so much. Her Helpless was probably one of my favorite parts of the show, and she just had such a pretty voice. I loved it so much. And like, I don't want to say this, but I liked her better than Philippa, which is crazy, because Philippa Sue is, like, amazing. She's queen. But I liked Ariana's portrayal better. Her Helpless was just perfect, and just everything. She was so sweet and kind and motherly, and honestly, before I saw the show, I wasn't expecting much, because I was like, oh, this American Idol singer. You know, I wasn't really expecting, like, to be blown away by her, and I was. She was incredible. Karen Olivo as Angelica. Okay, let me tell you, I have been, like, a Karen Olivo fan for so long, and when they announced Hamilton in Chicago, I'm like, Karen's gonna be playing Angelica. You know, she gets to stay in the Midwest. She would be perfect for the role. Lin, like, almost basically wrote it for her. So when they announced, on my birthday, that Karen Olivo was going to be playing Angelica, I was so excited because I was like, I called it and she is going to do great in this role. So I had very high expectations for Karen Olivo as Angelica. And I was expecting her to be up there with how good the role was and how good she did it. She was oh my gosh, she was so good. And when she first came out during Schuyler Sisters and started to sing, I was like, because just first of all, Karen Olivo was right there on stage singing live, and I was there watching her. And second of all, she was just so good. Every note that came out of her mouth was just a tiny million little angels were singing in my ear. She was so good. And she was she got so into the character, and during Satisfied at the end, she was crying, and her voice broke when she said, "At least my dear Eliza's his wife," and it's her voice broke, she started crying, the whole audience started crying. And during It's Quiet Uptown, she had actual tears running down her face, and I mean, so did I. So did everyone else. But she put so much emotion and so much into the role, and she was just so good. So good. Joshua Henry. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you. Oh my gosh. He came out at the first song, and I was just he started singing, and it was and then he was so good. And then his Burr, I feel during Aaron Burser and My Shot and Farmer Refuted, it was he was an annoyed babysitter who had to babysit all of these crazy kids in the Revolution, and it was hilarious. And then his Room Where It Happens was there was applause for legit 45 seconds after he finished, because it was so good. That song already is crazy, so good, and then he just took it to another level. He took the role to another level. Honestly, oh my gosh, he was so good. And he sounded a whole lot more theater-y than Leslie too. You know, Leslie is jazz, whatever. Joshua Henry, he sounded more Broadway, which I loved. I love Broadway, so more Broadway. That's always good, you know? Jose Ramos was he was a lot like Anthony Ramos. He was the one that was closest to his original cast counterpart, in my opinion. And adorable cinnamon roll, too good for this earth, too pure. That's really all, that's summing up Jose Ramos. He was just adorable as Lawrence, adorable as Philip, just this little guy on stage, even though he was taller than Miguel, but just he was just so good and so sweet. Chris Lee was the standout. Everyone else was so good. They were all so good. Chris Lee was the one everyone was walking out of the theater talking about oh my gosh, Chris Lee. Okay, Daveed Diggs is Daveed Diggs, you know? And Chris Lee lived up to Daveed Diggs and more. And he's only a senior in college. He's that young, and he was in my favorite one on the cast, and a lot of people have said he is the best one on the cast. He is so good. Every word of Guns and Ships I could hear perfectly live, better than I could hear them enunciated on the cast album. And he was so funny. He had all of this swagger as Lafayette, and it was so good. And then as Jefferson, he was just hilarious and sassy, and he was, in my opinion, the best one on the cast, which is crazy, because everyone else was so good too. Jonathan Kirkland as George Washington, just as good as Chris Jackson. And that's saying something, because Jackson's Washington seemed more of a father figure to Alexander. Jonathan Kirkland kind of reminds me of a football coach to Alexander, which is weird. I'm not a sports person. Why am I putting this into sports metaphors? But that's what he reminded me of. I don't know. He just did. He was so good. His One Last Time, honestly, I cannot tell you much about George Washington's songs because I was so overwhelmed by the sheer power of his voice, like blowing my face off. It was so good. I don't remember anything from History Has Its Eyes on You because I was freaking out so much. Samantha Marie Ware, oh my gosh, I keep saying everybody's so good. Everyone was so good. She was, okay, first act, the cutest Peggy Schuyler you are ever gonna see in your entire life. Like, oh my gosh, she was so adorable. Like, at the beginning of Schuyler Sisters, she was like, you know, they were pulling her out on stage, and she looked so, like, petulant and adorable, and just, she was the cutest Peggy Schuyler ever. And then as Mariah Reynolds, that voice, oh my gosh, she, like, she probably doesn't even need a microphone. Like, they could turn off her microphone and I could still probably be able to hear her. Like, just, she was such a powerful voice. So incredible. She was so good. Like, I was so good. And then all of, like, her stuff in the other songs. Like, you don't think Mariah Reynolds is in the other songs from the cast recording. But, like, she's kind of just, like, walking around during the other songs, like, showing that Mariah was there for the next couple years in Hamilton's life, and it is the coolest effect ever. She was so good. She was so good. Wallace Smith. Okay. Listen, I love Wallace Smith. I loved him in Les Mis. I loved him in Godspell, and seeing him in Hamilton was, like, a dream come true. And he was, like, he was perfect in the role. He was absolutely perfect. I'm not gonna say he was better than Okiri Inadawan, though. Like, they were exactly equal. And so good in different ways. If you were like, Addie, you get to see the show again, but you get to decide who you want to play Hercules Mulligan and James Madison, I'd be like, I can't decide. They're both so good. Like, the ensemble also was so good. I was just, like, blown away by everything they did. The two standouts, in my opinion, were Jose Amor and Holly James. Both of them. Like, they would be on stage and it's like I couldn't watch what the main characters were doing because I was so focused on Jose or Holly because they just, like, they moved so smoothly and beautifully and they were such beautiful dancers and it was so incredible. Also, Amber Ardolino's hair is gold. She was dancing and her hair was just going like whoosh, 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 whoosh. And it was like, I was blessed by her hair. Like, I was blessed to get the opportunity to see that hair in person. Goals. One person I didn't get to see in the ensemble was Jin Ha, and that's because he was playing King George III, which I really lucked out on that one. He is the understudy for King George III, and he was so funny. I actually didn't get an understudy slip in my playbill, so I didn't know he was going to be on, and then he comes out on stage, and I'm like, that does not sound like Alexander Jemin... He did not sound like the guy who normally plays King George III. And then I realized about halfway through the song, I'm like, it's Jin. I got Jin as King George III. And I was so excited because, like, when I get understudies, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. Because these understudies are not usually on, and I get to see this special show. He was so funny, and the best part was that, like, he is not that tall. So it was like, King George was like this little guy who was like so angry at America for leaving him, and his voice, this is a weird combination, but his voice sounds like a mix between Ramin Karimloo and Christian Borle. That probably sounds really strange, but like, that's what he reminded me of. So I was so lucky to like get an understudy who was just as perfect as the main would have been. Everything about this show was perfect. Some people are like, oh, Chicago casts aren't ever as good as Broadway casts. This one was. It was. And if you ask me, it was better. I liked this show better than I think I would have liked the original Broadway cast, which is crazy. Because, like, I'm obsessed with Lin-Manuel Miranda. I keep this letter that he replied to a letter from me, and I keep it by my pillow. Like, I'm obsessed with him, but if you were to ask me, like, hey, Addie, do you want to see Hamilton again? You get to choose. You can have Lynn or Miguel as Alexander. It would take me a while to decide. It really would. One disappointment, though. John Michael Fiumara was out that night, and while I think Yossi Chaikin, if that's how you pronounce his name, I might be butchering it, but he was in, and he did incredible, of course, Charles Lee / Man 1 track, but my goal is to have met every actor who has played Specs in Newsies the Musical, and I'm still only at one. I've only met Jordan Samuels. I want to meet Ryan Steele when I go see if I go see American in Paris next summer. And I thought I was going to get to meet John Michael Fiumara, but I didn't. Then again, I did not get to meet any of them, actually, besides Wallace, Chris, and Jose, because none of them came out to stage door that night. It was a BCFA thing that day, so I think they might have been busy, so I didn't really have much of a stage door experience. Chris came out, and I've heard he comes out for every show, which I just think is the sweetest thing, because he already gives his all for the show, then comes out for every stage door, and he was just so sweet. I was like, you were so good, you absolutely blew me away, and he was like, thank you so much, that means so much to me, and it was just like so genuine. I was just like, And then Wallace did not actually come out to stage door. He came out to talk to his family, and then the doorman was like, all right, no one else is coming out, so everyone left, and I kind of just hung out in the alleyway like a weird stalker person, because, listen, I love Godspell so much, and I was not going to, like, give up my chance to meet Wallace Smith. So he walks over, and I'm like, hey, Wallace, and he's like, goes like, hey, so super nice, like, wasn't busy or anything, and I was like, I just want to say, I loved you in Godspell, I loved you in Les Mis, I loved you tonight, you're so good, I'm such a big fan, and he was like, thank you, and gave me a hug, and it was, like, so great. And then later on the street, walking back to the parking garage, I run into Jose Amor, who had become, like, my favorite ensemble member after watching the show, so I got pictures with him, we talked a while. That was super cool, and they were, all of the cast members that I met were so nice and so sweet. It was just an incredible cast full of incredible people. I was blown away. And I hope that I will get to go back and see it again someday, but even if I don't, that's going to be the coolest experience I've ever had at the theater ever. Thanks for watching my Hamilton Chicago review. If you liked this, comment down below. If you want to see more videos like this, comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.